Good to go. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah McAnulty. I run the Skype a Scientist program, and this is our first Skype a Scientist live Q&A session for the year 2023. Really happy that you're all here joining us to ask questions about restoration ecology. We'll learn basically what even restoration ecology is, a little bit about our scientists' work, and then it's all about your curiosity, your questions. You get to ask whatever you want to know. So I'm really excited to introduce our scientists today, Saira Haider. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So I'm going to stop talking, hand it over to you. You can kind of give an intro of who you are, what you do, why you like it, and then we will get into all of our questions.
All righty, I will do that. So I'm just going to share my screen. I've got just a few slides so you can see what I'm talking about. Can you see the full slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. So I'm an ecologist and I work for the United States Geological Survey. And you can see this is a photo of me here. I'm in Everglades National Park, and I'm on a canoe, and I'm surrounded by the waters in Everglades National Park. And on the left, you can see a cluster of mangrove trees, which are a really special type of tree that grow in salt water, and they grow in the water themselves, in the water itself, which is pretty special. So you might be wondering, okay, Everglades National Park, but where is that exactly? So here we have a map of the United States, and I work at the very southern tip of Florida. So you can see that marked here with this red star. All the way at the very southern end, we have a very special national park, and it's called the Everglades. And so it's because it's so far south, it has a very different climate than most of the United States. So we're in a subtropical region, which means that our ecosystems, our plants, our animals, everything is a little bit different than, for example, in Rhode Island. And so next question, right? Like, what do ecologists even do? So ecologists study how plants and animals interact with their environment. And this is a photo you can see here. This is a photo of the Everglades, and you can see there's not that many trees. Most of the Everglades is a marsh or a wetland. So it's a lot of grasslands that are wet, that are flooded actually for most of the year. So kind of like a prairie, but very wet and spongy and mucky and muddy. And on the right, that's a photo of me, and that's when I'm doing a mammal survey. So you can see a little mouse there on the right, and that's because I was involved in some work where we were trying to find out, like, how many small mammals do we have in the Everglades? How many rats are there? How many mice are there? And you can see he's a pretty cute little fellow right there. So that's what ecologists do in general. And then I think, another question is, well, what's a restoration ecologist? What's specific about that? So I'll give you a little bit example of, I work in the Everglades. So this is a kind of a big aerial photo of the Everglades. You can see it's lots of water with green areas mixed in among the water. And you can kind of see some rivers in there too. So over the past 100 years, the Everglades were degraded. So in other words, when people started populating Florida and southern Florida in large numbers, they said, we don't need this big swamp. We don't need this wetland. We don't need this marsh. Let's just drain it. Let's get rid of all this water and let's turn it into something that we could use. Let's turn it into maybe farmland or build houses on it. And they tried that, but it didn't, and they worked for some areas, but it didn't work well for all areas. So there was a big part of the Everglades where they kept trying to drain it, and then their houses kept flooding again. And then they started noticing, we're draining this. All those areas started catching on huge fires, massive fires, wildland fires. And they had all this smoke, and it was very dangerous. And they started noticing other problems. So when hurricanes hit Florida, it caused more damage to the people who lived here when they drained the Everglades. So after a while, people started realizing, hey, maybe we do actually need to save this Everglades thing. Like, maybe these wetlands are actually important, and we should try to conserve them and preserve them. But because people had spent such a long time degrading the Everglades and trying to get rid of them, they weren't in a great state. They were they needed a lot of help. And so that's where restoration ecologists come in. So we come in, we're looking at the relationships between the animals, like those mice that I was collecting in that other photo. We look at the relationships between birds and crocodiles and alligators, and we try and study, okay, how do they interact with plants? How do they interact with water? You know, what's not working now and what would work better, and how can we try to fix that? And so that's basically what a restoration ecologist does, is we look at the system, we try and go out there and study what exists out there. We try to look for patterns of how animals interact with their habitat. And we try and say, okay, maybe we need more water here, or maybe we need less water there. This would be good for wading birds, or alligators need, they need more flooded areas. And then we give those sets of recommendations to folks who go out there and they do the work. They try and make those changes in the Everglades. So I think the Everglades is kind of a really cool example, and restoration ecology is a really cool example of something where a lot of times they think folks can feel like a little bit in despair because we hear so much bad news about the environment. We hear so much bad news about nature, and sometimes we feel like a little bit bombarded by all the bad news. But the Everglades are a great example of where people can have an awesome influence and do great things and really bring wildlife back. And we can do great things for alligators, and we can do great things for panthers, and we can do great things for bears, and we can really improve the system. We can have a really positive impact. And that's always really exciting to hear about, and to know that you can go out there and become a restoration ecologist and contribute and do great things to whatever environment you're in. So that's just a little bit about what I do.
Awesome. That was so cool. We have a question coming in from Kenneth. Do you, in your job, run into alligators a lot?
So I don't run into alligators a lot, although I see a ton. My job is a little bit different. So my job is what's called, I'm a modeler. And I know, like, usually when you think of modelers, maybe you think of like fashion models, but I'm here to tell you that there are two types of modelers. So there are fashion modelers, and then there are modelers like me, who we kind of like construct models on our computers. And so it's kind of like, let's say you have a Lego set and you're creating a model, maybe of a castle or a spaceship, and you're trying to like figure out how it goes together. And you look at the photo of the real one, maybe, and you're like, I think this one goes here, and I think that piece goes there. Well, I kind of do that with the environment. So we go out there and I go out there with the team, or other folks in my team go out there, and they might do a survey, and they'll go out there and they'll count how many alligators they see and where they see them at. And they bring that information back to me. And then I try to kind of fit this puzzle together. Okay, this is what I think it looks like. I try to put that together just like you would a Lego set, to try and create this model of what the natural environment is like. And then I use that model to try and understand the system, try and understand how animals operate and live within the Everglades. So I don't personally get to spend much time with alligators, but I have a lot of colleagues who do go out there, and they do night surveys. So a great time to catch an alligator is actually at night. And so they go out there in boats and they catch the alligators, and they actually catch them, and they put them in the boat, and they have to tie up their mouths so that they don't bite anyone. And they have to sit on them, and then they measure things. They measure things like the length of their tail and the length of their nose to their tail. And they might try and weigh them and try and figure out all the different really important details and specifications, try and figure out, is this alligator healthy, or is this alligator not healthy? And if it's not healthy, then they can bring that information back to folks like me, and we can try to understand, okay, why might this alligator not be healthy? Is there too much salt in the water? Is the water dirty? Is there not enough water? Do the alligators have enough to eat? So they go out there and they do really cool stuff like grabbing those alligators, and then they bring it back to me and I try and figure out, what can we do? Why is it not healthy? Or if the alligators are healthy, we can say, okay, this environment that this alligator is in is a really good environment. It's really good habitat. It's high quality habitat. And we can kind of use that high quality example to try and understand how to improve the environment of the alligator that's not doing as well.
Very cool. Sounds good. So I'm going to ask that we take the picture away so that there's more space for the hands to be seen.
Yes.
Even if I love looking at an aerial picture of the Everglades, that's really pretty. Okay. So next question. What is the difference between a conservation biologist and a restoration ecologist? Is there overlap between those two?
Yes, that is such a great question. Okay. So conservation, and it's kind of a nuanced distinction, but when we think about conservation, we're thinking about, okay, maybe for example, if folks know about Yellowstone National Park, they might say when that park was created, or maybe you know of a park really close to you that is not degraded, that maybe humans haven't interfered with the system too much. Maybe it's kind of just been left alone for a really long time, and it's animals are healthy there, and the forest is healthy, and the grass and the vegetation and everything is really healthy there. Then folks might say, let's save this bit of forest or this bit of prairie or this mountain region, and let's leave it alone. Let's mark it as saved for the environment, for the animals that live there, and we're going to conserve this area and more or less leave it alone. That's more along the lines of what a conservation biologist does. So they're looking at areas that maybe don't need as much help, that are maybe, they're in pretty good condition to begin with. Whereas a restoration ecologist is saying, this area is not okay, right? This area is important. We really want to improve it, but it's going to need some help. And we're going to have to do a lot of work to improve things here. And that's what a restoration ecologist does. Great question.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. We've got a question from the Knoxville Jewish Day School. How does knowing about the water cycle help you in your restoration work?
Yes, this is so important. And so South Florida is actually interesting in particular because it's different than the rest of the country. So, we don't really have winter in the same way that folks in Knoxville have winter, or the same way that folks in Rhode Island have winter. We really just have two seasons. We have a dry season and we have a wet season. So the wet season starts in May or June, and that's when all the rains start. And it starts with a trickle, and then it gets more and more and more. And then we might get things like tropical storms, and we might get hurricanes. Sometimes it will rain 9 inches in one day here. That's how much rain we get. Loads and loads and loads of rain. And the rainy season starts in May or June, and it goes all the way till about October or November, more or less. So it's about half the year. And then things start drying out. So in the rainy season, the water levels rise and they rise and they rise, and the water gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And then in the dry season, the water levels, they go down, they recede. And so it's a critical part of the Everglades is the timing of this water cycle. And so, for example, when the waters rise, that really helps the fish, right? The fish live in the water, and the more water there is, the more space they have, the more they can eat. So the fish populations grow and they grow and they grow, and they have more and more and more, which is great for, guess what? The alligators, great egrets, blue herons, all sorts of things that eat fish. And so we need the water, we need that wet season to be a good length so that there can be more and more and more fish. But, when there's a lot of water, that means that fish can spread out. So it might be hard for some of those wading birds to find the fish. And if the water decreases in the dry season, then the fish become more concentrated, right? They have to spend all of their time in a less amount of space, which means the wading birds can get a lot more, they can eat a lot more and catch a lot more fish more quickly, which means that they can have nests and they can have baby wading birds and they can feed their baby wading birds much more efficiently and much better because of that water cycle has, we have the dry season, then we have the wet season. So when things like climate change are starting to change that dry season, wet season timing, that can really mess things up. And that can really impact whether for example, the wading bird nest, how well they do.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. The next question is from Lisa. Are Burmese pythons problems in areas that are being restored?
Oh, yes, they are. Burmese pythons. So Burmese pythons, what happened was a lot of people thought it'd be fun to get Burmese pythons as pets. And then the Burmese pythons got really big. They got huge and they started to be hard to keep inside their homes. And so people just thought, well, it's a snake. It lives outside. I'll just let it outside. Well, it turns out the Burmese pythons were left outside, and then they had more Burmese pythons. And then those Burmese pythons had more Burmese pythons. And now we have thousands of pythons in the Everglades. And there's no natural predators. So where Burmese pythons are, there are things that, there's a food web. So something predates on the pythons. But here in the Everglades, we don't have anything. And so they can just keep growing and multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. And they get huge and they eat up all the little mammals. So they eat up the rats and they eat up the mice and they eat the possums. And there actually been Burmese pythons found that have eaten entire deer. If you can imagine a snake eating a deer. And so it's been a big issue. I have coworkers who they go out there and they try to catch Burmese pythons to try and understand like what we can do about it. But it's definitely an ongoing problem and we don't have the answers to that problem yet. Something we're definitely still trying to figure out.
Sounds good. Thank you. Next question. Are there piranhas in the Everglades?
Yeah, that's a great question. Luckily, there are no piranhas in the Everglades. Whew, thank goodness.
Very good. Okay. Don't need to worry about that. All right. I've got a couple rapid fire alligator questions. There are a lot of them, but I don't want to spend too much time on alligators. So let's here we go.
Okay,
What's the largest alligator ever recorded?
Whoa. I'm going to be honest. I don't know what the largest alligator ever recorded is. But I will say that you don't need to be too afraid of alligators. Everybody's really scared of alligators, but they don't want in your business. They just want to do their thing. So don't be scared.
Okay. Do you know anybody who's been bitten by an alligator?
I don't know anybody who's been bitten by an alligator ever.
Okay. Then I'm feeling good about this. Good. Next, have you personally ever seen a 4-foot alligator before?
Oh yeah, loads. And if you come to Everglades National Park, you'll see loads too.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I think that's all of, why do you inspect alligators at night instead of during the day?
Well, if you're going out and looking for alligators, it can actually, a lot of reptiles are nocturnal. So, they're active during the night. But also a little secret is if you go on a night walk and you take a flashlight and you shine it in the woods, certain animals have what's called eye shine. And so you can't see them at all. They're totally black, but their eyes will reflect lights when you show the line. Kind of like if you're walking at night and you have a reflective vest on for protection and it reflects back at you. So these animals' eyes work like that. So if you shine it, you can see the alligators like that. And it makes them so much easier to see. Spiders are like that too. Sometimes you'll see like these little eye shine in the forest and you're like, what animal is that? But it's actually just a teensy tiny spider.
Yeah. The spider eye shine is something that I am actually really grateful for, because back when I originally started doing field work back in 2008, I was really afraid of spiders, but I was working at night in the woods and I really loved that I could shine my flashlight, my little headlamp, and see where all the spiders were. Nobody's sneaking up on me because I can see you all because you're reflecting back at me. So I love that spiders kind of give themselves away like that. Make me less nervous in the woods. But I'm less scared of spiders than I used to be. I've come to terms with spiders in general. Okay, next question is from Spencer. What is your favorite part about being a restoration ecologist?
Oh my goodness. This is such a good question. I think my favorite part about being a restoration ecologist is the fact that I know what I'm doing is making a difference. I really care about the Everglades. When I go out there, I think nothing in the world is like this. We don't have anything. If this disappears, nothing can replace it. And the fact that I'm part of a really large group of people who are trying to keep it here so that we can all visit it and all love it and the animals can live in it, is incredibly satisfying and meaningful. So that's my favorite part, I guess, is making a difference.
That's a great answer. That's awesome. All right, next question is from May from Garden Spot Secondary Campus. What animals or plants are best to judge the quality of an ecosystem or the Everglades specifically?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, that's going to be different for every ecosystem is going to have a different set of plants that is good to judge the quality or not. So I'll give one example for the Everglades. So there's a type of sedge called sawgrass. And when we see sawgrass, they're really tall, they're kind of brown, and they're called sawgrass because the edges are so sharp that if you accidentally grab it, it'll cut your hand.
Yikes.
So it's feisty. And most of the Everglades, the grassy parts, the grassland parts of the Everglades were covered in the sawgrass. But if water quality is bad, so if water has too many pollutants in it, maybe from farm runoff, maybe from industry runoff, it will get replaced with something called cattail. So you might know what cattail is. It's kind of, you associate it with wetlands, and it has like this funny little brown thingy on top. And it's very wetlands in the north. So wetlands in North Carolina, for example, if they have cattail, that's a really good sign. But if we have cattail in the Everglades, it's a bad sign. So it really depends on where you are. Cattail will grow in areas where there are too many what we call nutrients, the pollutants in the water, and sawgrass won't. So in the Everglades, that's one plant that's a really good indicator. But again, it really depends on where you are. If you're in North Carolina and you see cattail, it's a good thing. So very context dependent.
For sure. Yeah. That's one of the things that you'll learn the deeper you get into biology, how like often the answers that we learn are so dependent on the context. It's like, yes. It's hard to make a rule that applies to everything because so many different ecosystems, or even like tissues in your body, like something that's good in your fingernails isn't good on your knee, or, like it's like very, very, context dependence is an important concept to learn as early as possible. Nuance. Anyway, next question is from Markeisha. Do the Everglades have a strong connection to the ocean?
Oh, yes. In fact, you can kind of see it if you remember that aerial photo of the Everglades that I showed. It was like more and more and more water as you looked out, and that's because they do fade. The Everglades is a body of water. It's a wetland that starts kind of in the middle of Florida, and it's kind of this slow moving system of some trees, mostly grasses, lots of water, and it eventually flows all the way down to the ocean. So it absolutely has a big connection in the ocean. And that's also where you see those mangroves, which are the types of trees that can grow in the ocean, which is kind of wild.
Super cool. So salt resistant. Love it. The next question is from Xander in Washington State. What causes fire in the Everglades?
Oh, yes. So fire, it's kind of interesting. I think a lot of times we think of fire as a bad thing, and it can be bad if it's too intense, or if it's too big, or if it starts encroaching on human populations. But fire is really important in the Everglades. So a lot of trees, grasses, different vegetation types actually depend on fire to be healthy. And so historically, fire in the Everglades could have been caused by lightning strikes, or it could have been caused by Native Americans who were managing the Everglades to keep it healthy. And right now, a lot of the fires in the Everglades, still lightning strikes. Some of them are from campfires that have gone bad, or people, flicking a cigarette out the window that has, caused a fire. But there's an entire team of fire specialists in the Everglades National Park, and they do prescribed fires. So they burn a certain area of the Everglades, a certain area of these kind of wetland prairies to keep them healthy. And they make sure to do that every, 5 to 10 years so that the lands can continue to be healthy.
Great. Thanks. So you've mentioned cattails as being like one thing that kind of shouldn't be there, but can you talk a bit about the invasive plants that have become a problem in the Everglades and some of the impacts they're having, as well as any efforts being made to deal with these impacts? This is an ecology class at Carver Academy in Chester, Virginia.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So we do have quite a few invasive plants in the Everglades. So We've some of them are native, like cattail, right? That's a native plant that we just don't want to see right here in this specific area. But then there are also some plants that are from other areas of the world. For example, Melaleuca, which is actually tea tree, like tea tree oil that you'll see in like shampoo and in different bath products, is actually a really bad invasive tree in the Everglades, and it will just take over an entire area and it won't let anything else grow. And so folks, there are entire teams of plant biologists who go out there and they spray these tea trees and they try and get these strands out of there. It's a very complex problem. Another invasive plant is called Brazilian red pepper. It's a gorgeous bush. Like you'll see it in somebody's yard and be like, wow, that's lovely. But it grows in such dense thickets that like it just squashes everything else out. And in fact, for your ecology class, you might want to Google the Hole in the Donut Project, which is kind of a fun name, where there was these massive thickets of Brazilian red pepper, and they could not figure out how to get rid of it. It was such a huge problem. They ended up bulldozing the entire thing. And it was just like barren land for a really long time. Brazilian red pepper is so invasive that it gets in the soil, and there's so many seeds in there that you can't just get rid of them all. You also have to take the soil out. That's how bad it is. So they had to take all the soil out of the national park, and then they put it in these huge piles. And so now there's just mounds of dirt out there. And it was the only solution that they could think of. That's how bad this invasive plant was. So Hole in the Donut is the name of that project. If you're in a class and you want to Google kind of some interesting history of how they took care of that.
Very cool. Thanks. Our next question is, how did you get into your line of work?
Oh, well, I had a long journey. So when I went to college, when I went to undergraduate, I thought I wanted to study physics. And I got a degree in physics, and it wasn't until kind of the end of my college experience that I started realizing that I was really interested in the environment, that I really liked spending time outside. I had taken my first ecology class, and I was like, this stuff is really cool. And so because most of my training was in physics and mathematics, I decided to go back to school to learn more about the environment. So I went back to school and I got a master's degree. And the cool thing about having, for folks who for kids who maybe are interested in physics and math and this kind of, or computer coding, but are also interested in the environment, it's, I didn't know about this line of work until I went back to school and got my master's degree, that the physics and the mathematical background really helps you build these models that I was talking about earlier, and trying to understand the ecosystem and trying to understand the relationships between plants and animals and water and the environment. And so there are a lot of different ways that you can get, if you want to work in the environmental sector, if you want to, if you're interested in that, there are so many different ways that you can get involved. So you can do it from this more kind of math, science, even like computer coding path, and do it like that. If you're more interested in like being out there and catching those alligators, or if you're really into birds, you can go that track. If you're really interested, maybe more if you really like history and you're really interested in more like policy and writing and like coming up with good ideas for how to do things, you can go that route. There are so many different types of skills that are needed to preserve the environment, to restore the environment, that it's just, there are so many different things. Whatever you like to do, you can probably find a way to get involved in work.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, are there any large cat species in the Everglades?
There is. So there's the famous Florida panther. So we have, a lot of people know about panthers in California, but we also have them here in the Everglades. Now, unfortunately, there aren't very many of them. So there are, I think on last count, only around 200 of these big cats in the Everglades, and they are really impacted by roads. So most of the deaths to Florida panthers occur from, they're trying to cross a highway, they're trying to cross a road, and a car doesn't see them in time and hits them, and they don't survive. So folks are really trying hard to try and build like fences. If you drive down in Southern Florida, you'll see these really huge fences on the side of the highway, and that's to try and keep the panthers out. Another kind of really cool thing they do is they'll make wildlife bridges. So they'll build bridges over the highway and they'll put all sorts of vegetation on them to show the panthers or other wildlife that instead of, crossing the highway, there's this other way that more resembles their natural habitat, and they can take that to get from one side of the highway to another.
Great, thanks. When you're like going about your day in the Everglades, do you ever see animals and you're like, I don't know what that is?
Oh my goodness, all the time. I admit that I'm not, especially there are so many types of birds that come through the Everglades. So I'm telling you, there, especially so, a lot of the birds that you'll have in northern areas of the United States, they, in the winter, you don't see them anymore. They migrate a lot of times to Central and South America, but they'll migrate through Florida. And so we have certain times of years when we'll see a lot of these different types of birds. And there are so many different types, and there are so many different types of little songbirds and little warblers. And I really struggle to tell the difference between all those different types of birds. But some people get out there and they go out there at like 6 a.m. They've got their binoculars and they've got their book and they are able to do them. So we're able to identify all those. And I have a lot of admiration for those folks.
For sure. Awesome. Our next question is about the Everglades in general. So how big is the area you work in? How big are the Everglades overall? And can anyone own parts of the Everglades, or is this like national land?
Good question. I'm not very good at estimating size. So there's Everglades National Park, which is just a small, it's maybe a third of the what we call the greater Everglades. So the greater Everglades extends all the way from Central Florida, which, to give you an area, like an idea of size, it's like, I'm in Southern Florida. It's like a 3-hour drive. I'm better at distances and size and driving amounts. So it's pretty big, right? You drive 3 hours and you'll get to the northernmost area of the Everglades. And that area, for example, isn't in a national park. But the southernmost area is. So the Everglades, the greater Everglades, is a combination of national land, so owned by the federal government. It's a combination of the Florida state government owns land. It's a combination of the Miccosukee tribe of Florida and the Seminole tribe of Florida. They have land in the Everglades. And then individuals have land in the Everglades as well. So it's really a combination of all sorts of government, individuals, institutions. For example, different nonprofit organizations have lands in the Everglades. So it's a big combo.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks. Our next question, what can we do as third graders to help protect the animals?
Oh, I love this question. So I would say, like, what you're doing now is great. Learning, being interested is a great way to start getting involved. And, whether that's, coming to things like Skype a Scientist, or doing things just like in your backyard, go out there and like try and identify the different birds that are in your backyard. So I think learning and teaching yourself and your family and your friends about the environment and about nature in general is a great way. The more I think that folks know about like how incredibly cool different birds and plants and trees are, the more people care about them. And so I think learning is a huge thing. And then, just, paying attention to, so third graders, like a little bit of, maybe you'll see a little bit of news. But I think in third grade, like learning, getting out there, going outside in the environment, the more that you use, for example, trails in natural areas, or the more that you visit these places, the more that people see that they're valued and that they're cared about. And it's really incentive to make more of these places so that we can preserve them and we can keep them for, into the future.
Awesome. Thank you. Our next question is it difficult to get assistance or funding from the government to do your projects?
So we're very lucky in the Everglades in that Congress, the US Congress has, there was a large act passed about 20 years ago to dedicate a large amount of funding to the Everglades to help restore it. Excuse me, not all areas that need that kind of funding have it, but we're very lucky in the Everglades in that a large amount of funding was set aside to restore it. That being said, you could always use more funding. And so it's kind of, we do have a lot of funding, but there are a lot of things that need done. And so it's a little bit of both.
Sounds good. All right, the next question, what is the most fun part of your job?
What is the most fun part of my job? I would say every now and then, since I mostly work at a computer, but every now and then I get to go out into the Everglades and see a little bit of it. So I really like going out in something called an airboat, which is, and I don't know if folks know what those are, but they're kind of like, because the Everglades are so shallow, you can't put like a regular boat in them for a lot of the areas because there's only like this much water. So what they do is they put a giant fan on top of the boat, and it by the fan going, it propels the boat through the water, but through the air instead of having like a regular propeller in the water. And so you can go through the Everglades and you can cover a lot of distance, and you can go to incredible areas and see lots of birds and alligators and just tree islands, and it's absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning. And I think that's probably like my favorite part.
That sounds super fun to me. I want to do that just for fun, for sure. All right. What is the most challenging part of your job?
It's a good question. I think sometimes we're faced with really tough problems, right? So I think the most challenging part of my job, for example, is when we're seeing the effects of climate change. So climate change is really causing sea levels to rise around the Everglades. And so that's causing areas to becoming flooded more often, or the water is saltier, and a lot of plants and animals can't survive under those conditions. And so I think maybe the hardest part of my job is just trying to figure out what we can do about that. It's a really tough problem. It's really complex, and we don't have all the answers yet. And so sometimes it can feel like we don't know what to do, and that can feel, it can just feel really bad when you don't know what to do about something and you really care about it. But that's kind of why we need more restoration ecologists. We need more funding, and we need folks to kind of get out there and really care about the Everglades and to spread the word so that we can figure out the solutions.
Sounds good. Thanks for answering that. Let's see. What is your favorite animal that lives in the Everglades?
Oh, wow. I think I probably like the little blue heron. I think they're super cute. So they're really big blue herons, but then there's also this little one, and it even has blue legs. And I just think the blue legs just put over the top in terms of cuteness. And I love them.
That's a great answer. So cute. How long have you been doing this job? And also, why did you apply for your job? Those are the two questions.
Okay. So I've been doing this job about 6 years now, and I applied for this job because one of the things that I really like to do, a lot of the models are built using a programming software, a statistical software called R. And I think that programming and scripting and coding to me is a lot like a big game. It's kind of like a computer game, or it's like putting a puzzle together. And so this job had a lot of that. And I was like, that would be a lot of fun if I just got to do that all day. If I just basically got to like do a game and like try and solve puzzles all day long, like how fun would that be? And so that's why I applied to this job.
That's awesome. That's a good like scientist reason for doing it. I like solving problems. I like solving puzzles. If you like solving puzzles, then yeah, science is a good career for sure.
Exactly.
All right, we only have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. There have been a lot of invasive species problems. Certainly Southern Florida is like, just like there's so many invasive species there. So what do you do about, we've got one about the iguanas, and also every time it gets cold and the iguanas fall from the trees, that does crack me up a little bit. And the pythons, like what do we do? Do we like go out and start killing them? Like what's the approach?
It's really tough. So I think like the one of the number one things that we need to do with invasive species is, think twice before you get one of these pets. Encourage your friends to think twice before you get one of these. Do we really need, I think that is I'll say that's my personal opinion, is just, these are wild animals and they're really hard to take care of. And so folks, they may have the best of intentions. I don't think anyone's trying to spread invasive species in the Everglades, but they don't want to kill the animal and they don't know what to do about it. So they just let it out. I understand. So maybe the best thing to do is just to not get these types of pets in the first place. And if you do, you can always, and you find that it's too difficult to take care of, to surrender it to a shelter or someone who can, instead of letting it out. In terms of what do we do now, a lot of it is containment. So let's make sure that these invasive species don't spread. They're here, we're going to have to adapt. Adaptation is a huge part of the Everglades. Let's just make sure they don't spread to new areas.
Right. Sounds good. Thanks. Okay. So we try to keep these sessions to 45 minutes, and we always try to ask everybody the same 2 questions at the end of our sessions. So here we go. The first of these questions is, if you had everyone's attention in the whole world and you could tell them one thing about your area of expertise, what do you tell them?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I would say, this is tough.
It's hard.
I would say pay attention. I would ask everyone to pay attention to what's going on around them, right? These little things that matter, like if a big thing in the Everglades, protecting the Everglades is new urban construction, for example. And those choices get made at a very local scale. So putting a road through the Everglades is causing the Everglades. And these aren't decisions that are getting made at the national level. We all have a say in them. Right. So I would say my number one expertise is pay attention to your environment, to be out there and pay attention to what's changing.
Sounds good. All right, we've got one more question that'll wrap us up. You still have everybody's attention in the world, and you can tell them anything about anything. It doesn't have to be related to what you do. It can be like serious and important, or it can be like silly and insignificant, but something that you just like. What do you tell them?
Okay. I think I would tell them, maybe I would tell them to go, if they haven't already, to Google a video of a hippopotamus eating watermelons, because that is one of the most perfect things that we have in this universe.
That's true. That's a great answer. Okay. Sounds good. Pay attention to your local environment, things happening around you, and be sure to watch hippopotamuses eating watermelons. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you want to plug, anywhere you'd like to send folks before we say goodbye?
No, just if you ever get the chance, come down to Everglades National Park, come check out the alligators. Don't be scared of them. They don't want to be in your business. So come out, look at the little blue herons, and just have a great time. Go outside.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. This was super, super fun. I learned a lot too. Everybody at home, there were a lot of questions today. There were like 150 of them, and we only answered 60 of them. I got through as many as we possibly can. So if you, in your class or in your group, wherever you are right now, want to have a conversation with just your crew and a scientist, we have that available. You can sign up at skypeascientist.com. We match once a week. We can get a scientist who studies the thing that you're interested in, just for your group. So that's always a thing you can do. The next time we will be gathering, we will be talking about robots with a robot engineer on the 7th of February, same time, same channel. And we'll see you then. Whitney, thank you for interpreting for us. We appreciate you. And everybody else, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.